we're going to bring on the SphereGen team, and we've got again Amy Pacelli, and account executive, and also Andrew Guagliardo, and lead mixed reality developer. And Amy and Andrew, you guys got a great presentation today. I got a chance to look through it, and it's going to be really exciting to see. So I don't know if you're going to go on, Andrew's going to come on later, but we will turn the program over to you.
Thank you very much, Ron, and thank you to Eric as well for all the kind words. We were lucky enough to meet him early in his time there, and the technology has come a long way, even in the last 2 years or so. So a little bit about SphereGen. You know, we are a Microsoft mixed reality partner. We were actually the first one on the East Coast, and for a long, long time, we were the only service provider in New England for mixed reality. So we were actually founded back in 2008, and our background is in doing application development. We do have clients and offices around the globe, and our specialization has always been highly innovative projects, especially ones that are aimed at increasing business efficiency. We do have our own products as well that we have split out now into separate companies. We have 4 areas we work in. The one we're going to focus on today is mixed reality. And we'll break down for you in just a moment kind of what mixed reality is. But we also work in virtual and augmented reality as well. Mixed reality and augmented reality are very similar, but you'll see a couple differences in our next slides. So what are the differences? Some of you may already be familiar with these terms: virtual reality, augmented reality, and mixed reality. But for those who aren't, we wanted just to take a minute or two to break down what the differences are to help you understand what's happening when we show the demos of the projects that we did later on. So virtual reality, that's probably the one that is the widest spread in the market. People are the most familiar with it. It's a fully enclosed headset, so I wouldn't be able to see anything outside of that. And it's all virtual content and virtual graphics. So this is really practical for people who are training, but not practical if you need to walk around or move at all because you can't see where you're going. The next one is augmented reality. So augmented reality is in the real world. A lot of people are familiar with this, but might not affiliate it. It kind of has an overlap with special effects. The difference with augmented reality is it's virtual content that is broadcast over the real world, but it's done in real time. So it's just augmenting what's already there. You'll notice in this picture, the robot is right in front of me, and that's because usually augmented reality is on a phone or a tablet. And it will just project inside of that device onto what you immediately see. So if I walk to the kitchen, the robot would be following me there as well. It's not permanently stationed where I've placed it. And finally, mixed reality, which is what we're going to focus on today. Mixed reality uses a unique subset of basically anchors that can pin it to a real world location. And that's kind of why it's mixed reality, because it's mixing the real world with virtual content. And you'll notice here the robot's actually pinned to a specific location. We find that for manufacturing, usually this is the most practical because you want something stable and anchored to a specific item. And that way, if you're overlaying digital content, it's not going to shift or move, which is something that we actually worked a lot on in these projects. So best use cases for AR, you'll see a lot of things with augmented reality, like I said, and tablets. You can just click through the pictures, it's fine. And this is something where you are able to hold a tablet with 2 hands. That's when you should use augmented reality. Or if you're tying it into another system that's also mobile-based, that's a great opportunity as well. It's not really designed for hands-free. So you can go to the next slide. So mixed reality, you'll notice all of these are hands-free. This is the HoloLens in these pictures. That's our favorite headset currently because it's just ahead of the market on where the technology is at. Mixed reality is great if you need to work with your hands to follow instructions because you're able to do a pretty accurate virtual overlay of those directions. You're also able to do things like make 3D video calls as well. And the HoloLens is the device we use for these projects. The HoloLens is an excellent device for First of all, it's about $3,500. So for mixed reality devices, it is on the higher end for cost, but it is a fully wearable computer, and the possibilities of what you can do with it just continue to expand on a regular basis. We're particularly interested in things like voice commands and eye tracking. It can also recognize your gestures, and it's fairly complex, the 3D models you're able to show. And these are just some of the features of the device. One thing to note, the battery is in the back. It's not on, it's permanently attached. So to charge it, you do have to plug it in. A lot of our clients that are in manufacturing will have a dedicated charging station. The battery life is about 3 to 4 hours, depending on what application you are using. So that's actually pretty good considering it's fully wireless, and a lot of the applications are doing a pretty heavy lift. You do not need a ton of bandwidth to use this. You can also connect it to hotspots as well, but it is fairly low bandwidth. And one thing I do want to note, so the HoloLens, it can see everything that you see. So sometimes people are not aware of that, but that's really important to note. If you do have sensitive processes, you want to make sure you're tying your HoloLens to your organization in a secure way. It also responds to your voice. It responds to what we call your focus, which is where you're looking. It's kind of combined with how your head moves and where your eyes go. It responds to your gestures, so you get to see some of that today. It can measure rooms and objects. It can also recognize objects, which is something really exciting we've been working with. And it does calibrate for your eyes specifically. It can do iris recognition. And the content it projects is very interactive. So you'll see in this picture, that's me playing the piano through the HoloLens. Those sort of weird-looking things on my hands, that's the tracking that has been put on to track my hand movement. All right, and I'm going to turn it over to Andrew.
Thank you very much, Amy. All right,
Thank you.
So hi folks, my name is Andrew Guagliardo. I'm one of the senior mixed reality developers at SphereGen, and we're going to be talking about two different partners that we worked with in order to kind of do an exploration of mixed reality technology and to kind of explore what it could possibly do for these two pilot partners. So today, first, we're going to talk about Habco and our working process with them. Next slide, please. Thank you. So we're going to talk about Habco as a company, kind of the problem that we discussed with them that they were looking to solve, what we kind of proposed as a solution, and then what we ended up putting together for Habco and kind of what the final result was. At the end of this, we're also going to invite Habco on just to have a couple comments. So Habco produces state-of-the-art equipment and technologies, as well as providing logistics support. They were initially incorporated in 1970, and they recently celebrated their 50-year anniversary. They do things like engine tooling, airframe tooling, and also are a licensed FAA repair station. So when we first engaged with Habco, we had a discussion kind of about what sort of problems they were thinking they'd like to solve with mixed reality. And one of the big things that came up is that as part of their fabrication process, they need to lay out a lot of stencil markers. And these markers can be time consuming to place, and they need to be accurately aligned and properly leveled. And this can be a tedious, time consuming process. And so they were interested in ways that they could potentially improve this process, either to speed it up, make it easier, or all of the above, by using the HoloLens and mixed reality technology. So as part of our discussions with Habco and thinking about the process, we kind of proposed that we would put together a small custom software solution using the HoloLens. As Amy mentioned, the HoloLens is a computer that basically is wearable. And so in addition to kind of off-the-shelf products, it's possible to design custom software as well. Because Habco had such a nice, small targeted use case, we were confident that we could build them a small piece of custom software that they could use for this demonstration process. So we had a couple of prerequisites that we needed to basically have to make this work. And those included things like a 3D model of the item that Habco wanted to lay stencils on, as well as all of the information from Habco about the stencils themselves, their placement, their font, things like that. And as part of the solution, we were going to use QR codes as a way to anchor the hologram. So as Amy mentioned a little bit earlier, the HoloLens is spatially aware. So it is mapping the environment around it and mapping its 3D space. And we can leverage things like QR codes to place anchors to tell it where to locate a hologram and to help lock that hologram in place. So after we basically put all of these prerequisites together, we started to kind of get to work and started to collaborate. And through an iterative process, Habco generated a 3D model markup, basically using CAD software, and then passed it over to us at SphereGen. We went through and cleaned it up because there are some modifications that usually need to be made in order to put it on the HoloLens, and added things like the appropriate fonts, sizing, and location for the stencils. Going back and forth with Habco, we also kind of thought about where we were going to place the QR code and set up the marker so that it would be easily kind of added to the device. And as these pieces of equipment are basically coming off and need to have stencils applied, it was important that we made something that was kind of reusable. So if you can actually see on the right-hand side there, there's this little circular disc that was a QR code that we magnetized that could just easily be attached to the piece of equipment, scanned, and then Habco could use that to lay their stencils and then pull it off and put it on their next piece of equipment. So we wrote some custom software using C# code and an application called Unity in order to have the headset identify the QR code and lock it into place. So as I mentioned, this was an iterative process. So we passed the solution over to Habco as soon as we had something working and had them kind of start playing with it and giving us feedback about what they thought and what kind of needed to be adjusted. And that part I mentioned about the magnetized QR code was something that we kind of discovered as we were thinking about it, and we kind of deliberately set it up so that it could be easily affixed. Another thing that we noticed was that the stencils needed to be properly leveled as well. So not just in the right location, but it's very important that they're properly leveled. And we were actually able to use the accelerometers on the HoloLens to actually determine the direction of gravity and then make sure that the stencils, even if there was something off with the scanning, would autocorrect and level themselves properly. Another point was because they might be doing multiple pieces of equipment in a single run, the application needed to be able to rescan a new anchor. So if they were to scan an anchor on a piece of equipment, the hologram and stencils would pop up relative to that anchor. And then when they move the anchor, they need to be able to reset everything attached to that new anchor. So we incorporated all of those changes and then delivered the application changed back to Habco for them to try again. And throughout all of this, Habco was testing it out and training themselves on how to use the HoloLens 2 as well. You can see actually in the bottom right corner there, this is a little menu we added to allow to be able to rescan the QR code and also to auto level the stencils. And this is a menu that's tied to the user's hand. So it's completely out of their way until they put their hand palm up, and then they have to look at their palm to pull up the menu. This makes it very easy to access without being intrusive. So now we're going to show two quick little videos. The first video is going to be the previous method that Habco used for laying out their stencils. And then it's going to follow up with an example of a video taken from inside the HoloLens of what our solution looked like. So in just a moment here, Donna will be playing those videos for us. So you'll notice that the process is relatively quick, but it does require, constant measuring and adjustments.
so fast. Just line it up, line up the H, make sure you're nice and flat and level, and boom, got that stencil done.
So you could see in the first video that, Ray basically needs to go down and kind of measure everything out. And, while the process is kind of quick, you can imagine how repeating that step for every single stencil can slowly add up additional time. On the second video that we showed, you saw from kind of the exterior and then from the interior from the headset that basically he just needed to line it up with the stencil itself. Now, one thing I do want to call out is that because the recordings from inside the headset are basically a single view, Ray is actually getting a binocular view. So some of the offset that we're seeing in the video isn't present when you're actually wearing the headset. Now, at this point, I'd actually like to invite Ray and Mike from Habco to kind of join me, and we'll talk about some of the comments that Habco has from this process and what they thought about it.
Hey, great.
Ray.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Hi there. So, we'd gotten feedback from you folks that you were interested in kind of continuing with this, and that you kind of thought that this would really help kind of reduce cycle times. And if you want to speak to that, please let us know.
Yeah, sure. So technology for us was really very exciting because as we start on this project that we're working on now with this gearbox container, this represents one of many opportunities that we have that are larger quantity, big scope projects for Habco. And what we saw immediately from this is that it helps us to reduce our amount of time that we're processing. Not only the stencils that we saw, but we're looking at it for other things, complex assemblies, and some other stenciling projects that might be a little more difficult than what we did. This particular project, we didn't really have any scope as far as exact locations where they were supposed to line up in place, but we have other products where we do have that measurement tolerance to put those stencils on. So that's going to be a big help for us. And the interesting thing to see, and Ray will kind of touch on this a little bit, you saw in the video kind of quickly there, as Ray was walking up to the container that we were stenciling, you could see the other guys in the background, and there was just this interest of folks who are shop floor labor people. It's not necessarily technology people, but they just drew them like a magnet to the process. It was great to see. We've got some people that are just barely using a cell phone that said, "Oh wow, let me see this. Let me put the headphone, let me put the headset on and let me try it." And it was instantaneous, the great positive feedback that we had from that. So we see this moving forward as a great opportunity for us, not just in the stenciling that we did to start with. We look at other manufacturing things, possibly welding things. We only see an upside from this. So
that's great to hear, especially, the part about, new technology always kind of has that little bit of hurdle, right? About trying to need to learn something new and making sure that it's kind of accessible for everybody to kind of remove that barrier. So, everyone can kind of take advantage of what's possible. That's definitely a big component. And I know that you folks are interested in, potentially looking at also like side-by-side comparisons, right? To kind of lock down what the actual, improvement might be, right? And Ray, I know that you were kind of the primary person, working with the device. And, I'm curious, how hard you kind of found it to kind of get used to using it, and, any comments you have about, what you see us going from here.
Well, for me, it was very easy to use, but that's expected given my age and interest in technology. But what was actually exciting to see was, as Mike mentioned before, some of the shop employees who aren't very tech savvy, they put the glasses right on, and within a couple seconds, they were up and running. Like, they had no problem using it. It was really exciting to see.
That's great.